It always begins subtly, an expression, a tone, a glance that lingers just a little too long. You feel like you're being seen, noticed, appreciated. But look closer. What she sees isn't you. Not entirely. What she sees is potential, possibility, projection. You've mistaken attention for recognition. But her gaze isn't meeting your soul. It's scanning for compatibility with a fantasy she's been nurturing quietly since girlhood. She's not observing the man you are. She's evaluating the man you could become in the story she's already written. And this illusion is so intoxicating, so seductive, that you believe it too. You start becoming that man. You step into the role. You begin acting, not because you're deceptive, because you're flattered, because it feels good to be chosen, even if the version of you being chosen isn't real. But here's what no one teaches you. Being chosen for a role is not the same as being loved for your truth. Carl Jung spent his life peeling back the layers of the human psyche, mapping not just what we think, but what moves beneath our thinking. And one of his most profound revelations was this: we rarely see people as they are. We see them as we unconsciously need them to be. This is the phenomenon of projection. And in romantic relationships, it's not just common, it's almost inevitable. She isn't falling for you. She's falling for the reflection of an inner, masculine figure she never fully examined. What Jung called the animus, a psychic imprint of masculine energy formed in the unconscious of every woman. If left undeveloped or unexamined, that animus becomes not a guide, but a tyrant. It whispers expectations she doesn't realize she holds. It chases the man who embodies chaos, intensity, and danger, and overlooks the man who offers presence, stability, and depth. You think choosing you, but she's casting you in a story already in motion. And the moment you fail to match the character she's written, you're no longer needed. She replaces the actor, not the narrative. This isn't malice, it's unconscious. And that's what makes it so dangerous. And you believe her fantasy too. You wear the mask she hands you. You perform. You try to live up to the image, not because you're weak, because no one ever taught you to see the difference between being desired and being seen. You don't even notice it at first. The role feels good. You feel wanted, admired, chosen. You mistake admiration for intimacy. You assume that if she sees something special in you, it must be real. But you're not being seen. You're being scripted. You adapt. You become what she needs. Charming, confident, wounded, wild, whatever serves the fantasies she's been carrying in her subconscious. And for a while it works, until the cracks appear, until you express a need that doesn't fit her story, until you show a side of yourself that breaks the character she cast you in, until you reveal your humanity, your complexity, and the fantasy starts to fall apart, and suddenly you're no longer enchanting, you're disappointing. Not because you failed as a man, but because you failed as a symbol. You weren't chosen for your truth. You were chosen because you looked like someone who could temporarily help her avoid hers. Jung warned us, when the unconscious dominates a relationship, both people lose touch with reality. The woman projects the animus. The man abandons himself to be what she wants. And when the fantasy collapses, the fallout is brutal. You're left confused, disoriented, heartbroken, wondering what went wrong. But nothing went wrong. You just stopped playing your part convincingly. And the play must go on. From a distance, it looks like success. You've been picked, desired, pulled into her orbit. You feel like a winner, like you finally matter. But here's the hard truth. Being chosen is not the same as being known. When you are chosen based on a projection, your identity becomes a currency in someone else's emotional economy. You begin trading authenticity for connection, and the more you try to maintain that connection, the more of yourself you have to edit out. You begin monitoring your tone, hiding your doubts, smiling through your discontent, because deep down you fear that the moment you stop performing, you'll be replaced. And that fear governs your every move. You believe that if you just try harder, stay available, stay agreeable, you'll be enough. But it never works, not for long, because what she's drawn to is not who you are, it's what you represent. And representation is fragile. It needs constant maintenance. Eventually, you exhaust yourself. Eventually, your soul starts to ache from its own absence. And that's when the resentment creeps in, not toward her, but toward yourself. Because some part of you knows you traded your truth for her attention. Jung called this self-betrayal the silent tragedy of the modern man. A slow erosion of integrity in exchange for temporary belonging. We call it love. But is it really? Jung warned us, what we often name as love is sometimes nothing more than mutual projection. Two people not truly meeting, but merging illusions. Her animus meets your anima. Her fantasy seeks your performance. Your longing seeks her reflection. And so the performance begins. She says, you're different. You believe it. You want to be. You shape yourself to fit that image. You say what she wants to hear, offer what she wants to feel. And for a time, it works. But it's not love. It's casting. It's theater. Because real love doesn't require masks. Real love doesn't need you to audition every day. Real love welcomes the parts of you that don't match the fantasy. But projection doesn't have that capacity. Projection can only love its own reflection. And when the reflection changes, when you stop mirroring what she's looking for, she'll say, you've changed. She may not say it out loud. She may not even know what's shifted. But she'll withdraw, because her heart was never touching yours. It was touching the image she built from memory, from longing, from the unconscious blueprint she never questioned. And you weren't loved. You were used to animate an idea. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, of becoming yourself, beyond the roles, beyond the projections, beyond the expectations that shaped you since childhood. And make no mistake, most men never begin this journey. Why? Because the roles feel safer. Because being chosen feels better than being alone. Because approval, even if it's conditional, feels like love when you've never known the real thing. So you stay, you perform, you adapt, you shrink, you confuse compromise with connection. You wear compliance like a virtue. You let your reflection define your worth. But Jung wasn't interested in comfort. He wasn't here to make you feel better. He was here to wake you up. He saw it clearly. When a man defines himself by how desirable he is to women, he becomes a hostage to feminine projection. He loses contact with his soul. He bends. He flexes. He smiles through his slow disintegration. And worse, he believes it's love. But love doesn't cost your essence. It doesn't ask you to disappear. If you're losing yourself to keep her, you're not in love. You're in submission. And the only way out is through the discomfort, through the solitude, through the terrifying silence that asks, Who am I when no one needs me to play a part? That's the beginning of individuation. It's not dramatic, it's not romantic. It's real, and it begins the moment you stop asking to be chosen and start choosing yourself. Solitude. For many men, it is the most feared state, not because it is painful, but because it is unfamiliar. You've been conditioned to believe that your value must be confirmed externally, that if a woman desires you, you are valid. If she chooses you, you're enough. If she stays, you matter. So you pursue closeness, not from wholeness, but from lack. And in doing so, you become malleable, predictable, easy to shape, easy to use. You start tailoring your masculinity to suit the emotional weather of someone else's inner world. And every time you do it, you lose a piece of yourself, not because someone took it, but because you gave it away. You weren't taught to sit with the silence. You were taught to fill it, with noise, with charm, with action. You weren't taught to own your loneliness. You were taught to fix it, with a relationship, a role, a rescue mission. But here's the paradox. Until you embrace your aloneness, every connection will be a performance. Until you face the emptiness without flinching, every love will be a lie. Carl Jung said that the path to wholeness is narrow and often walked alone. And that loneliness you're running from, it's not a punishment, it's a purge of the false identities you've worn to be accepted. You must die to the boy who needs approval to become the man who chooses truth. This isn't about withdrawing from love, it's about withdrawing from dependency, from the need to be mirrored in someone else's eyes to know who you are. Because when you finally learn to stand alone, fully present in your own skin, you stop being seduced by attention, and you start being drawn to depth. At some point on the path, the story you've been telling yourself no longer works. The story that says she misled you, that she changed, that women are the problem, that love is broken. Jung wouldn't let you stay there. He would look you in the eye and ask the harder question. Why did you let yourself be chosen by her in the first place? Because if you're honest, brutally honest, you'll see it wasn't deception that brought you into the dynamic. It was hunger. It was the part of you that still needed her gaze to feel real. You were drawn to her because she mirrored a forgotten piece of you. You stayed because she gave shape to something you hadn't yet developed within yourself. A fantasy matched your vacancy. Her projection landed where you had no boundaries. And when the illusion shattered, you called it betrayal. But it was really an invitation to take responsibility for the roles you keep accepting. You're not a victim, you're a volunteer. Every time you enter a relationship without clarity about who you are, you become easy to mold. Every time you fear being misunderstood, you offer a version of yourself designed to be liked. And then you wonder why no one loves the real you. But they can't. You never gave them the chance. So you blame her for the mask, but Jung would remind you, you put it on. And now the question isn't why did she leave, it's why did you abandon yourself long before she did? This is the moment the mirror turns. This is where growth begins, not with rage, but with responsibility, not with blame, but with boundary. And from that place, you start to rise, not as a reaction, but as a man who no longer agrees to live inside anyone's illusion. When the illusions fall away, hers and yours, something terrifying happens. You're left standing in a space that feels too quiet, too raw, too exposed. No mask, no script, no one clapping, just you. This is the space most men run from, because it feels like failure. It feels like death. But it's not. It's birth. This is what Jung meant when he said, "You must die before you die." The false self must burn, the performance must end, and what emerges in its place is not louder, not stronger, it's quieter, it's rooted, it's steady. You begin to notice something strange. You no longer chase, you no longer explain, you no longer need to be needed. And that calm, that sovereignty, it unsettles people. Because you no longer fit into the roles they expect from you. You no longer give the emotional reactions they once used to control you. You no longer make yourself small to preserve the connection. And they feel it. Your silence becomes unsettling. Your presence becomes heavy, not in a burdensome way, but in a grounded one. You are no longer a character. You are no longer someone else's project. You are no longer performing the part of the good man who stays at all costs. And this is where power begins. Not the power to control others, but the power to remain yourself when everything around you demands otherwise. This is the essence of individuation. To stand as a man, no longer looking for definition, to become the one who no longer reacts, but chooses, to hold your own gaze without flinching. When you finally stop performing, the world around you shifts, subtly at first, then profoundly. People who once praised your emotional availability now say you've grown cold. Women who once clung to your reliability now accuse you of being distant. Friends who thrived on your predictability now say you've changed. They're not wrong. You have. You no longer hand out pieces of yourself just to be liked. You no longer shape your identity around someone else's unfinished story. You no longer enter relationships hoping to be completed. You've stopped offering yourself as a blank page. You've become a finished sentence. And in that presence, firm, clear, unbending, you become untouchable. Not because you're hard, but because you are no longer pliable. You knew this man would not be widely accepted. He wrote that society would fear him, misunderstand him, label him as difficult. But that man, unmoved by projection, unattached to performance, is the man who finally lives. And something paradoxical happens. When you no longer seek to be needed, when you no longer collapse into the shape someone else requires, when your energy no longer bends for approval, you start attracting those who've done the same work. She'll find you, not the one who wants to fix you, complete you, or cast you, but the woman who has also burned through her illusions, who has faced her own animus, who no longer wants a myth, but a man. She won't worship your image, she'll respect your essence. She'll meet you not as a goddess looking for a pedestal, but as a sovereign presence, ready to stand beside your own. And the love that blooms from that place, it will feel nothing like performance. It will feel like silence with depth, stillness with spark, clarity without control, choice, not dependency. You won't need to impress her. You won't need to disappear to keep her, because she sees you, not the version you curated, not the image she imagined, you. And that's the kind of love that doesn't demand applause. It just is, quiet, rare, real. But here's the final truth. Most men won't make it this far. They'll stop at comfort. They'll return to the familiar role. They'll trade freedom for fantasy one more time. But not you. You've walked through the fire. You've seen the cost of pretending. You've lost enough versions of yourself to finally choose the one that's true. You no longer need to be understood by everyone. You just need to stop misunderstanding yourself. This is not a conclusion, it's a return to presence, to wholeness, to the life you were meant to live before the world convinced you to perform. So now, be still, be seen, and let them misunderstand you, because the man who no longer plays the part finally gets to write the script.